Hello, everybody. Welcome to another astrology question and answer time, question and response time. I don't always have the answers, but my name is Claire, and I'm here every second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, which is right now. And if you are here live, of course, I'm here for you to ask me questions about astrology, whether that is astrology techniques or anything going on in transits right now, anything that strikes your fancy. I have gotten a few questions over the last month, so I did not do a call for questions. So apologies if anyone was looking for that. I should really announce if I'm doing one either way. That would be the better thing to do. But I did get a few questions. So we're going to be talking today about Mercury retro, or sorry, Mercury in Pisces, not quite retrograde, but Mercury in Pisces. We're going to be talking also about reception, particularly reception involving exaltation. And then finally, we're going to be not in this order. I think I'm going to do it in a different order, but also if there's an eclipse in the solar return chart, how do you handle that? How do you interpret that? So we've got those three things today. Of course, if there's anyone else here, we'll do our best with whatever questions people bring. Welcome. Hello, Lau. Hello, Clark Wade. Welcome to the party. We are here to talk about astrology. I hope you're all well. Let's see. I think what I do want to start with. Hello, welcome across the hedge. I, s- I, I see you're familiar. Um, Kai, I assume. New handle, perhaps. Um, I think I want to start with the eclipse example. So someone was wondering about a solar eclipse if someone has a birthday around this upcoming eclipse. How do you interpret that in the solar return chart? So I tried to find someone who was in this situation, and I'm going to walk people through how I might go about interpreting this. So, first things first, we're looking at someone who might be having a birthday around February 17th when the sun is at the end of Aquarius. So, right now, if I pull up the transits for the moment, we've got the sun at the end of Aquarius. And in a few days here, we're going to have an eclipse, a solar eclipse at 28 degrees of Aquarius, so at the end. And so this is going to be a configuration that's going to end up being in some people's birthday astrology. And whatever the astrology is at the moment that the sun returns back to that same degree in the sky that it was when you were born. That's called your solar return. It's when the sun, solar, returns to its location in the birth chart. And so sometimes this will happen on your birth date. You know, if you were born on the 17th, it'll be on that date. But sometimes the solar return is maybe the day before or the day after. The calendar date sometimes differs from the astronomical goings on. And so looking at that, there's many layers when we look at timing. We want to look at annual profections if we're doing Hellenistic type of astrology or medieval Islamic Persian astrology. They're all choosing their time lords for the year, and they're also looking at the solar return or solar revolution chart, and that is going to be a predictor or almost baked into your year from birthday to birthday. And so a lot happens around the birthday that's pretty important to look at because you're going to get new Time Lords every year. You're going to have a solar return chart. And then we look at like, progressions or Fidaria or zodiacal releasing or transits then after all of that. So, or some of those things before. I would look at zodiacal releasing as maybe one of the first things sometimes to get a background note on matters. Anyway, I digress. The solar return is but one of these many timing techniques. And it does tell us a little bit something about the year ahead for that person, again, from birthday to birthday. So it's not going to be like January to December. It's whatever your birthday is, that's when your year begins. And so I've called upon Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day, who just did the opening performance for the Super Bowl. I mean, the Benito Bowl. I should really be talking about Bad Bunny, right? But I wanted to find someone with a February 17th birthday, and it just so happened to be this guy. Uh, there's some other people that have this birthday as well. Um, I kept trying to find like, I don't know, a more chill, less serious like example, but I kept getting like Cancer and Capricorn rising people, and it kept falling on like serious topics like money and health and death. And so we're gonna go there. So sorry, Billy, if I'm sure you're not listening to this. I'm gonna try to be as respectful as possible, and I'm gonna be vague. I'm gonna be really vague. So the first thing I wanted to do actually is make sure, like, who are the Time Lords for the year? Because before we even care about any transit, we need to know, in this case, is the sun or the moon a Time Lord? Or are they in a year that activates Aquarius or the second house or Saturn as a Time Lord, where we might end up seeing Aquarius as a more activated place in the birth chart for that year? And so if the answer is yes to any of those questions, and so if we go and we look, and here I'm also, I mean, this is worth noting. I also want to see if Mercury is a Time Lord, because Mercury is also going to be in on this story for Billy Joe Armstrong. And so I want to actually look at, okay, yep. So, well, either way, yeah, they're going from a Mercury year into a Cancer moon ruled year. And so the moon is going to be important. So, yeah, right away, we learn that there's a Time Lord situation going on. And so eclipses and the transits of the moon are going to be more important starting on the birthday. Um, let's actually be complete. Let's do, are they a day chart? They're a night chart. So we also want to profect from the moon, and then we've got Venus being a Time Lord from that perspective, looking at some of the conditions for the year, maybe beyond topics, but more like how is the year gonna be resourced? And then we see Mercury, if we profect from the Lot of Fortune, speaking more to body or wealth, health or wealth type things. So yeah, it is worth watching then. And so if we bring up the solar return chart for, I did not relocate it, for this year, 2026, we see, yeah, the moon is about coming into this eclipse. It still is meeting some other planets first. Here we see they're meeting Mars, which is not ideal. However, we know that this person is a night chart. They were born with the sun below the horizon. And so we know that sometimes Mars is going to be less of a threat. We can also see that we've got a night chart here that we're working with, just barely. Um, so then Mars is not the hardest planet in the chart. So everyone can kind of dial down the threat assessment on that. That being said, the moon running right into a malefic for the year in the solar return chart is going to flavor things. And then we know that right after this, there is going to be an eclipse. And so eclipses, same significations that I always use. It is like a new moon in this case that is amplified, that is louder, that whatever the beginnings and endings that every lunation cycle portends to, here the beginnings and endings are going to be even more impactful. And they're most likely going to have to do with topics of their resourcing, whether it's their simple liquid money or resourcing or their more complex finances. This could have to do also with travel and labor. Great beginnings and endings around travel or labor. We know that they're a traveling musician. That's what they do for their labor. There could be themes around health, especially given that Mercury is around. Mercury is a time lord from the lot of fortune. Mercury rules the sixth house. And if we look at the solar return chart, this is happening right around the the ascendant. This is kind of plugging into this, the solar return ascendant. And so there could be matters around their identities, their roles, but also the physical body, the mental health as well. That counts as well. So there's a lot of specific topics around health and wealth that could be having great beginnings and endings. Billy Joe Armstrong could take up pickleball in 2026. Maybe this is the big year where they get into the same sport that my mom does. No offense. It doesn't have to be the sixth house does. Sometimes it's disease and recovery from disease, but sometimes it is the upkeep, the regular care and management of our bodies. So some great beginning or ending there. Uh, I won't go further than that, but in general, an eclipse is going to mean the same things as always in the solar return chart that they would mean in transit. But here it's really making those eclipse stories important for that entire year. It's really baking it in. I use that phrase a lot, really setting it into the year in a more pronounced way, making whatever these big beginnings or endings are, it's really going to flavor the year, maybe even more than we would expect otherwise. And then even more so because we have these time lords that are part of this. Moon, Mercury in this case as well. So, um, that's one example. Let me see if I missed. Oh yeah, and then another thing. So we want to, of course, look at where the eclipse or whatever solar return event, we want to look at, just to be clear, where it's falling in the natal chart. And then also we want to be clear on where that's falling in the solar return chart by itself. So I definitely prioritize the overlay on the birth chart. The root chart is so important always, but we can see that this is also really at this moment for this person. This is kind of getting into some first house territory. So that also may come into importance for some reason. And finally, 6 months later in August, then I will be watching, especially for someone with an eclipse in their solar return chart. I'm going to be extra interested in the next eclipses 6 months down the road. So those are some of my thoughts on how to handle that. But yeah, it's going to be one of the bigger notes in the year for that person, so definitely worth discussing with them if you're talking to someone about their chart or looking at your own, to focus on those topics that are getting activated. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. All right, cool. So no questions at this point. And I will go on. Hello, David. Salutations as well. Um, let's go to our next question, which is going to be about uh, mutual receptions. And the question here, and thank you to Neutral Bear for the last one. Appreciate the last question from Neutral Bear. Next question comes from Sarah, and they are wondering, can exalted planets also be in mutual reception? So, or maybe a more basic question, can exalted planets be in reception, not just domicile involved, and therefore receiving some sort of mitigation or additional layer of protection or benefit? The example is someone with Moon in Capricorn and Mars in Taurus. So let's pull up this example. And short answer to this question is yes. We can include not only domicile, but exaltation in our using of reception. So I'm going to back up and define all these things, but the short answer for the person who has the question, yes, that counts. So we've got Oh, well, won't you look at that? We already got a moon in Capricorn. And then they said a Mars in Taurus. Let's actually get my pen to stick. Make sure I read that correctly. Yeah. And for the purposes of this, I don't think it matters too much what houses they're in. So let's say we have an applying aspect between Moon and Mars. Let's say the Moon's at 2 degrees, Mars is at 8 degrees. The Moon is moving faster than Mars. And so they're going to be completing a trine with this imaginary Mars at 8 degrees of Taurus. So reception is when one planet is connecting with another and it sees that planet in their domicile. So in this case, let's see if we have a case of this. So like, let's say the moon was in let's say we had the moon in Scorpio and Mars in Taurus. Mars would see the moon in its sign. The Mars rules Scorpio. So Mars would see the moon over in their domicile and say, "Hey, the moon, you're in my place. You're in my home. This is where the toilet paper is. The bathroom is on the left." And so Mars would see Moon in their place and help them out. And this is really based on the guest host relationship that was part of the cultures that made this astrology in Northern Africa, Southwest Asia. There was this guest host relationship between planets in their domicile, their home. And so, Venus, their domicile is Libra. So any other planet that comes into their home, it's their job to take care of them. So this is where the idea of reception comes. You're receiving a guest in your home and helping them out. And so that's the underlying basis here. Usually we talk about it in terms of domicile, a planet seeing another planet in their home. But it also has been extended in a lot of older traditions to include planets' exaltations. So in this example, we have Mars who would be seeing the moon in Capricorn, where the Mars finds exaltation. Mars is seeing the moon and saying, "Hey, you're in Capricorn. I love Capricorn. Every time I go there, I get treated so well. Here's all the door, locks or codes to all the doors so you can get into places, helping the moon out a bit." And it also helps in this example that the moon and Mars are both nighttime planets. They're nocturnal planets on the nocturnal team. They would both be in Earth signs, which they like. So there's a lot of congruency and reasons for Mars to want to help the moon. And likewise, this is a fun example because we see that the moon would see Mars in Taurus in a place where the moon exalts. So then the moon, who is not doing, in both of these situations, these planets are not doing very well. They're seeing each other in their exalted places. And then this connection that, I mean, already these planets would have been in a trine, which is more of a constructive, helpful relationship. Here now that relationship is strengthened. There are more favorable, constructive things that might come of it. So yeah, it could be really, really helpful. So there can be reception, kind of one-sided reception. There can also be mutual reception. So you can have one planet seeing another planet in their home, or you can have two planets seeing each other in each other's home. So, for instance, if we had, um, when the moon is in Pisces, that's a mutual reception. So if we go ahead a few days here, we're going to have a Pisces moon. Here, moon is in Jupiter's sign. And at some point, they're going to be connecting with Jupiter, who is in the moon's sign. So they're in each other's signs. It strengthens their bond and it makes things that they do together more favorable. For the most part, that's going to be the case. So That's reception in a nutshell. There are other examples of this. There are it gets pretty complicated, especially once you get into the Islamic, more medieval tradition. They are doing a lot of really detailed, nuanced things with reception. So there's way more to learn about it, but for the most part, it's something you want to see in a chart. It's a mitigating factor. It's helpful. So I hope that answers that question. We have one coming up here pretty soon that'll be interesting when Saturn goes into Aries and Mars is in Aquarius. We're going to have Mars or Saturn in Mars's sign and Mars in Saturn's sign. Hoping that this is more of a constructive relationship between these two planets that usually are very different, have very different ways of going about things. So I'm hoping that this sextile has helped even to work together even further in more constructive ways for us. Yeah, than it might otherwise. Okay, I think that's all I have for that one. And yeah, I guess maybe last thing, in terms of other types of mutual reception or reception, I guess maybe it is worth noting. So in Hellenistic astrology, it was called an exchanging of signs. That was kind of what the Greek word roughly translates to in English is an exchanging of signs. There are going to be some times where you're going to have planets that are in aversion. So let me get my chart back up here. So we're going to have times when, say, like, Mars in Libra versus Venus in Scorpio. They're in each other's signs. Venus would be in Mars's sign and Mars would be in Venus's sign, but they're not sharing an aspect. This is still an exchanging of signs. There's still going to be a coming together of themes, and there may even be some modest mitigation or help, but it's not going to be as strong of a type of mutual exchange or reception as you would have with an applying aspect. Like, again, say if this 2 degrees Mars was running into a trine with like an 8 degree or 2 degree moon running into 8 degree Mars or something. That's an applying trine. That would be an applying aspect where that mutual reception would be much stronger. So that's worth noting that these things come in shades and variants, even negative varieties sometimes, but I won't get into that now. All right, and then the last topic today, thank you, Sarah, for that one. Wanted to mention Mercury in Pisces. So, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but essentially, actually, did I write it down? Yeah, they did write it down. Uh, yeah, they were wondering, okay, so we have Mercury in Pisces happening right now. And the person was wondering, since they have Mercury in Pisces natally, would they be able to weather any unfavorable conditions of Mercury on top of it being retrograde, et cetera, versus someone who has a well-placed or neutrally placed Mercury? So the question is, if I have that in my birth chart, am I going to handle it better? When it comes in transit, am I going to have a better time with it, more favorable outcomes than someone who doesn't have that in their birth chart? And I think, yeah, I mean, kind of my off the cuff, I don't really have evidence for it, no sources, but like, yeah. And I think it's coming from a more intuitive place of if you have been forced to work with a certain set of conditions or tools your entire life, you're going to be better at it than someone who didn't. So, for instance, Let's talk about Mercury in, um, like I have Mercury in Capricorn. So when I'm communicating, I like to, I mean, to be honest, like when I'm not with clients, when I am left to my own devices, my communication is pretty utilitarian. I love bulleted lists. I love getting to the point. It's great. I'm pretty frank and to the point with stuff, very declarative, very just saying what needs to be said. The whole, Saturn isn't necessary type thing. It's not about the kind of subjective experience of the luminaries of the sun and moon. It's not about performing or sharing something in an entertaining or soft way. I have other things in my chart that pick up the slack in that way. But yeah, that's how I would prefer with an Earth Mercury. I'm sure a Mercury in Virgo can relate to some of the stuff I just said. Very practical communicators, can be very to the point when they need to be. Very like looking at facts and info and pieces of information and details. Yay, Mercury. Versus, okay, now for me, I'm not used to a water Mercury. So, but maybe someone who's had a Mercury in water their whole life, maybe they are better at communicating in ways that are more creative. Maybe like I'm not actually that good at poetry. Like I sometimes it'll come out of me, but it's not usually there. Mercury and Pisces, they might be better at reading some types of nonverbal communication. They might be better at just explaining things also in ways that go beyond verbal. So we're dealing now with poetry, with symbolic language, with seeing a symbol and having a bunch of things come to mind about that symbol that you see. Instead of the journalistic excellence of Virgo and Pisces, we've got the parable. I always talk about the parable or the short story that really it doesn't matter what the details are or what year it happened. It's the point of the story is like the principle and the overarching meaning, you know? So Mercury is being tasked with something that it wouldn't normally choose to do. Mercury's job is usually to collect information, organize it, sort it. In Pisces, they're asked to make meaning from it. That's usually a Jupiter job. It's usually Jupiter's job to make meaning from stuff. But here, it's like, no, you're actually going to do it. You're going to take all those little details you're usually looking at, and we're going to force this Mercury to step back from them. And that can be a lot because then you're like getting the wider perspective and all the details. So I've known some people with Mercury in a Jupiter ruled sign to be able to have that capacity to see the details and the small things, but then also to be able to zoom out and see the meaning of it all and how it all fits together. That is the learning curve that the Mercury Pisces person has been doing their entire life that people like me haven't. I don't, this is why you don't see me writing books. I don't write papers usually. I've been trying to write a paper for like ever and like versus like I dated a Mercury in Pisces for over a decade who had and it was in his ninth and he had multiple publications. He's one of the scientific illustrators that I mentioned of the two examples that I've seen. So there's still an ability to communicate, but they're being asked to do a really hard thing. And it took my ex a really long time to write a paper because he was bringing together so much stuff. Oh, it was so much info he was trying to synthesize. So, also, they've been given watercolors to communicate instead of a notebook and a pen. And so, what cool skills over the course of a lifetime might a Mercury and Pisces person have? Probably a bunch of them. But also, I imagine there are difficulties doing those regular Mercury things. If there are any classical Mercury skills that the native with Mercury and Pisces has, any. issue with details or uh, any kind of communication challenges in the classical modes of communication. So maybe you're great with symbolic language or interpretive dance as a form of communication, but maybe you're like taking a test and doing the grammar stuff, you know, that kind of classical whatever that society forces us to do. Maybe that kind of stuff doesn't come as handy, um, at least earlier in life. So I don't want to dismiss those challenges and be like, ah, it's just all going to be cool stuff later. But it's kind of a both and. And I do think that someone who has this natally, once it comes around in the sky, yeah, this is stuff you're used to. These are waters that you are familiar with. And what the good news, the extra good news is that now there's no longer Neptune in here. We do have to deal with Rahu. Today we are dealing with Mercury and the North Node together. But for the most part, especially moving forward, there's going to be a lot less in Pisces for Mercury to deal with in the future. No Saturn, no Neptune, no lunar nodes. Like as of July, the lunar nodes will get out of here. So I'm looking forward in the years ahead to having a Mercury and Pisces experience that isn't so encumbered by all this other stuff. So short answer, yeah, I think you're going to have a better time than me. And very similar to people who have Mercury retrograde or Venus retrograde or Mars retrograde, any of the retrogrades in your birth chart, then when those things happen in the sky, it's not that you entirely escape every single retrograde challenge, but for some reason, I have been reported to by many of them that uh, they seem to do better during retrogrades if they have that in their birth chart. And maybe it's, I don't know if it's chicken and egg. It's like, do they end up um, being better at that because they were forced to? Or, is it an innate thing? I don't know. Um, Realizing I have the wrong city up here. But in any event, yeah, I hope it's going well. At least, I mean, today, no promises on today, with Mercury being with Rahu, the head of the dragon. But overall, we are in the we are in the pre-retrograde shadow. So I hope it's going well. I hope it's going great for people. But be careful. Be careful with forms, be careful with facts and details, and be careful with the settings in your computer software. Be careful with information, your speech, speaking, listening, making sure you've got the information correct. Things are not about to get any more clear in the next couple weeks. So just do your diligence, double checking information if you have to be a certain place at a certain time, if you have to have a certain form in at a certain date. Just be extra careful. I've been having typos over here. I've been having my own technology challenges, plenty of things. So that pretty much concludes. We are done in record time. So unless anyone has any other questions, that's really all I had for things. Okay, yeah, across the hedge is agreeing that yes, if they have a if someone has a wonderful Mercury in their birth chart, uh, usually not having to deal as much with the Mercury challenges when the retrogrades happen, they seem to be hit harder. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm partly in camp, not great. I mean, I know I talk about my Mercury being in an Earth sign in Capricorn, which can be very grounding and stabilizing, but it's also combust within like what is it, within 3 degrees of the sun. And running into Neptune by 1 degree. So I'm usually in some kind of weird combust Neptune, Mercury challenged situation. Uh, yeah, there are worse. There are worse. And I think, I mean, to be honest, like this is kind of we're coming into, I know I'm just going to parrot something that I know Austin and Chris were talking about on the last podcast, but yeah, especially with this next lunar eclipse, really couldn't have a ruler in any worse shape. They're combust, retrograde, in fall and detriment. So pretty unstable. So be careful with your Mercury parts of your chart. Like if you're a Libra rising, be careful with long distance travel, with buying plane tickets between now and really March 20th. Be careful with your 12th house stuff. I'm going to be careful with my fifth and my eighth. I already have my taxes done. I already did all of that shit because I was scared of this. So, do your best out there. We're kind of already in it. So just slow down, I would say, especially with stuff going into Aries. All right, last call. I don't think anyone has any other questions. So yeah, this one will be short and sweet. And I'm gonna go to preparing some stew because it's winter and it's time for stew. Thank you, everyone who attended. Yup, sorry, I brought up the magic word. I know how much everyone loves doing their taxes. It's like my reverse Super Bowl. It's like what I prepare for the most, but I look forward to the least. Uh, all right. I hope everyone has a good rest of your month. Oh, actually, a couple announcements. Um, because the weather is so wild next month, I am going to reschedule my next question and response time, my next question and answer time. It's not going to be next Tuesday, or sorry, it's not going to be the second Thursday of the month in March. It's not going to be this usual time. I'm trying to find out where I put it. Did I reschedule it? I thought I did. Yeah, I'm gonna do it on the 26th. So, my next Q&A for astrology is gonna be Thursday, March 26th at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. I just wanted to avoid Mercury's retrograde. I wanted to avoid as much of that as possible. I didn't want to, yeah, I didn't want a lot of things that were in the sky around the first couple weeks of March. So, thank you for being flexible there. And then I don't think I have scheduled my next forecast. No, I have not. Probably need to do that. So stay tuned, everybody. Stay tuned. Also, I'm going to be sending out a newsletter with a lot of this information. Probably going to be doing a price increase on some of my services. Things are tough out there with fees and all kinds of stuff. So, um, long story short, I think a lot of people are struggling, and I am one of them as well. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to shift some things around in my business in order to keep this ship afloat. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to like go bartend or something. I don't know. I won't be doing this though. But I'm not gonna enact any of that until March. So I'm gonna give people like a good 4 to 6 weeks. I'm gonna start talking about it more and more, not to create like, scarcity, but just to give people a lead. And I'm gonna continue having a sliding scale, and I'm gonna continue having discounts once every quarter. So there's always ways to have access to astrology together with me if times are tough, which I know they are for a lot of people out there. So, yeah, that's happening. Gosh, I think that's about it. If you want to check out my other work, it's all on my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. That's where you can also sign up for my newsletter if you're interested in keeping up with my monthly events, my monthly forecasts, when I'm actually doing them. Sign up for my newsletter. I only send one out a month. That is also where I have usually updated information on anything that I'm up to. Yeah, best wishes, everyone. Take care of each other, take care of yourself as best as possible. And I will see you at the end of February at some time when I can find a little window where it doesn't look terrible astrology for me to do something. Um, yeah, I'll see everyone. It'll be right in the middle of the eclipse window. So I'll see you in the middle of the eclipse window at the end of February at some point. Stay tuned. Take